and if possible, improvise, drawing from whatever little we know of their journey. This book is one more motivation to do just that, to peek into an achiever's handbook. I congratulate Priyambada for illuminating the extraordinary journey of one of the greatest patriots of independent India, a man to whom we owe more than what we can express. And this evening, this celebration is a collective way of passing his light forward. Like his and my hero once said, "My life is my message." Dr. Swaminathan's life was his message, and I'm honored, deeply honored, to be his messenger. Thank you. Namaskar.
It's my honor and privilege to invite up on stage, and he's on stage with me, Dr. Hassan, to formally release the book, please. Sir, please. Shall we? Sir?
Please.
Shall I roll or would you like to do this?
No,
I've spoken so much today, I want to break. I'll turn the floor over to you, sir, now.
Well, first let me say that I'm very grateful you sent me the book and asked me to do this because though I get a lot of books, my workload is usually so high that I rarely get a chance to begin and finish a book within a few days like I have this time. And because I did that, I was reminded that the great beauty of books as opposed to movies or, these days everybody's on YouTube or videos or reels, is that books actually provoke you to think because there's only so much you can convey in the written word. And so the images and the kind of emotions and the sentiments they invoke in you are very much based on your own experiences and your own path in life. And so they're deeply thought-provoking and they're also a much more personal experience than watching a movie or a TV show or something like that. So I must say that when I read the book, I was struck by several thoughts which I had not quite articulated clearly in my head before. And I would say the predominant among them was just as a public servant, as a minister myself, the two things that really stuck out for me. One, the value of political leadership. Leadership that is willing to take a risk in the face of deep adversity or great problems, whether that's Indira Gandhi, whether that's C. Subramaniam, whether that's a Corazon Aquino, whether that is Mahathir and Anwar, or different people at different times when their country went through great difficulty, decided to take very, at the time, risky, courageous decisions. And policy gets driven a lot by people who make those kinds of choices. And I think the value of true political leadership is making difficult decisions in very desperate times. So I think that stuck out first for me. The second, where you talk about the three S's, Dr. C. Subramaniam or Mr. C. Subramaniam, Dr. Swaminathan and Mr. Sivaraman, and then of the Tamil trio, which we're rightfully proud
yes,
of.
Yes, the three S's.
Yeah. I actually thought it should have been the three S's and one B, because the value of Mr. as the finance secretary cannot be overstated, right? I know, having been in finance, I know the value of having the ultimate pen, and the ultimate pen is usually the finance secretary or the finance minister. And so, while everybody else can move everything else, having somebody in finance who can actually close the transaction, ensure that it executes, especially in those days when there was a dearth of foreign exchange and the import of the grains needed a lot of foreign exchange. So I think it should be the three S's and one B of Tamil Nadu rather than just the three S's.
Yes, I think that's one of those stories which comes out in the book because Dr. Swaminathan's father-in-law, Mr. Bhuthalingam, was finance secretary, and I think he played, quite an unwitting role, in making sure that, the files which finally reached him actually, made sure that the largest grain import in history actually went through. So true, I should have, actually in my next edition, I'll make it SSB.
I'm not sure it's unwitting, right? I didn't know till I read my good friend Montek Aluwalia's note at the back that actually it was against the instinct of the finance minister that Mr. Bhuthalingam was able to push it through. So I won't say it's unwitting, I'd say it's quite a kind of profound role, which he should get credit for, actually.
But it surely is a quirk of history that you have your father-in-law in the right place at the right time. I think that's what destiny does to us. It gives us opportunities. But, if you're not there, right people, right time, right place, things don't work out. And I think for Dr. Swaminathan, he was a product of history.
I agree with all that. I don't think you can put Mr. Bhuthalingam's role down to just being the father-in-law. I think he was a deeply thoughtful man.
That was a happy coincidence.
Happy coincidence.
Very happy coincidence.
Deeply thoughtful man, deeply patriotic civil servant. executing in the right way for what he thought was right. Happily, he was also his father-in-law. Yeah, true. Yeah.
Yes, that is true. That is true. But till my next edition, it's a great idea that I'm going to change it to SSB. I mean, it didn't strike me until you brought it up, but there were actually 4 Tamilians who were the helm of this great transformation. You know, our first twisted Atmanirbharta, which we went through. So that is definitely something which HarperCollins is sitting here. I'm sure they're taking note. They are, and they're doing your next book as well, right? Your debut book as well.
Yeah. True. Anyway, one of the other things that I thought about, which I didn't know, though I know Dr. Samya reasonably well, and I didn't know the family history. But throughout the book, the essence of the character of the person comes through. And again, in my understanding of the world, I thought about 2 aspects of his life that probably shaped a lot of what he did. One is growing up as part of a joint family. In his case, out of necessity at some point because his father passed away early. But in my case, I had the same experience without that necessity. There's something about growing up in a joint family with a lot of children being treated like as if you're in a kibbutz, like, you know, everybody's exactly the same and everybody gets exactly the same food and the same clothes and the same access. And I think it makes you a more empathetic, more kind of thoughtful about the greater good and the society around you, as opposed to nuclear families. That's just the thought that came to my head from reading the book. I don't know, because I've only had one life. I don't know what it feels like to be the other way. But I think this notion of growing up in a large joint family actually must have played into a lot of his thinking about inclusion and women and things like that. And I think the other thing is the exposure to international education and international thoughts and cultures relatively early in life. Again, we're all shaped by our own experiences. I was a reluctant expatriate when I left, and then I was extended expatriate for almost 30 years. But going when you're young is very different than going when you're a bit older and successful and not as, you know, when you're already molded in your thinking a bit, maybe you don't, you're not as malleable, and so you don't absorb as much. But I think when you go in your late teens, early 20s and so forth, as he did, and that to multiple places, different universities in the UK and the US and then other parts, I think gets you to be a bit of an out-of-the-box thinker. Right? Because you've seen different ways of life and different approaches to different problems. And so I can sense that in 2 ways. One, in terms of the out-of-the-box thinking and the kind of broader perspective that came from early years in different educational systems and postdoctorates and so forth. But also, if you think about it, the relationship with Norman Borlaug, established at the University of Wisconsin, must have played a great role in his decision to reach out to him and say, let me try the Mexican dwarf rice, right? So the relationships you build when you work shoulder to shoulder cut through a lot of cultural and otherwise geopolitical kind of, what can you say, inertia or friction, and bring people together in a way that pure commerce or pure alignment of interests probably don't, right?
That is true. You know, when you spoke about the family, when the farmer suicides happened in Vidarbha, and he actually went, you know, much against the wishes of the Vilasrao Deshmukh government, which didn't want him going from, you know, house to house to find out what the real truth was on the ground. Everywhere there was one lament of his, that the breakdown of the joint family system was what had precipitated this enormous, you know, number of, you know, deaths and suicides. Because he said that, you know, in a joint family, as you very rightly pointed out, nobody lets you down. Everybody has your back. And you are able to shoulder every difficulty. You know, the spoils of everything are shared, and you also are able to kind of share any burden that comes your way. And he said with the, the breakdown of the family, that joint family unit, you had these very, very unfortunate farmer suicides. And of course, the other thing which you brought up, was the value of, out-of-the-box thinking and of having ties abroad. But, Dr. Tyagarajan, I think the one other thing which strikes me when we talk about, making ties abroad, was he lived in the 1960s when he was doing all these things. You didn't have WhatsApp. You didn't have the internet going faster than you could say Jack or think. Everything was on snail mail, on telegrams, which came once in 2-3 weeks or something. So imagine how much he kept up with the research and he knew what was happening all over the world and how his ties were so global. And I think my book talks about one of the greatest roles of his life, which I think was, hasn't been highlighted as much as it should. The fact that he was a diplomat and the fact that he had ties which, as I said, his goodwill spread well across India's physical borders. And that is exactly the result. The seed import was actually proof of that, of his goodwill, which kind of existed everywhere, at least out of our borders.
Yeah, I think, much as we can value political leadership and decision making under uncertainty, surely a lot of bets are made not on just ideas, but the messenger who brings the idea. So clearly he had the ability to impress upon those who were taking the ultimate call. And, whatever that ability was, it was shaped by continuously learning, continuously keeping updated, and, if not being the smartest person in the room, being the best informed person in the room.
But imagine 24 hours a day, he had his research, but he also had all his correspondence to get through. In fact, I believe he used to carry like stashes of envelopes and those inland letters, I still remember them. I don't know if they still have it. I don't even know if post office are still working these days. I mean, some have unfortunately shut down everywhere. I think England shut its last post office, I think a couple of months ago, weeks ago. That's what I read. And he used to send off little notes to everybody from airports, anything, that caught his eye, or sometimes even those were used for congratulatory things. So those ties which ultimately bind were very strong in Dr. Swaminathan's case. And that is why, I think till the time he last drew breath, I mean, he probably had the greatest number of friends everywhere, and I've taken his book to so many embassies. As recently as Tuesday, I met the Vietnamese ambassador who said that, he was a friend of Vietnam. And that's been the constant refrain. He was our friend. He was not just a scientist who belonged in the realm of science, he was a friend.
Yeah, I think, there's two ways of looking at that. I think the first is that you must, both for ideas and in some sense, we're in an interconnected world and in a global era. But especially after COVID, one of the things we think a lot about is self-reliance or independence. And, food, of course, is very primal. But at least in Tamil Nadu, we worried a lot about oxygen, we worried a lot about vaccines, we worried a lot about drugs. Of course, then you start thinking about manufacturing and so forth. So I think the impact of self-reliance on food when it was seen as a strategic or a geopolitical thing back in the 60s, 70s, has only been accentuated in a world because we had never really seen a kind of pandemic that shut all transactions and all transport and all, trade. So on the one hand, you want to work with everybody, you want to learn from everybody, you want to collaborate with everybody. On the other hand, on the core essentials, you better be self-sufficient. You better be self-reliant. And I think what the Green Revolution did, first in wheat and then in rice and other things, is really give India that ability to withstand and not have, repeats of the famine that really shaped his thinking, the Great Bengal famine. So, you could argue both sides, but in different times and different cases, they make sense.
But it was science actually, Dr. Tyagarajan, at that time in the 1960s, which actually science led to political stability. And the fact that you had the Green Revolution also meant that you could take political decisions independently without the US breathing down your neck. And one of the words in the book is Mrs. Gandhi telling Dr. Swaminathan, Swami, can you do something to get the bloody Americans off my back? I hope there are no Americans here, and I'm sorry if I'm offending, but that's the truth which is there in the book. So I think it was definitely, the harbinger. I mean, I talk about Atmanirbharta, but that Atmanirbharta also extends to political, reliance, self-reliance as well. And I think that dictated so many things which came after Bangladesh's liberation war. Mrs. Gandhi could take that decision because she didn't have the US breathing down her neck. Even Pokhran, smiling Buddha, for that to shoot off into the sky and to dodge, the Americans, that could have only been done because we had food security, which was so essential.
Yeah, I mean, even now we are in an age of tariffs and negotiations based on I'm going to tax you at this rate and that rate, right? So if margins and relative ratios of exports are strategic enough and political enough that governments are worried about re-election prospects or standing, then imagine what it must have been in terms of I can't eat enough. Of course, it was a different scale. So clearly, politics has many faces or facets. Surely the kind of national capability or capacity is the beginning of being able to stand tall in any kind of bilateral or multilateral situation. And most citizens are smart enough to figure that out. And so it makes an impact on your perception of political leadership.
I also think that, the fact that, he did it at a time, and I think politics was different in the 1960s and 70s. Politics was very different from the kind of politics we have today. And I think that was, it was, are we heading into uncomfortable waters? I don't think so.
No. I'm not sure it's that different, that's all. So
you don't think it's that different?
I think whenever you have one party have a relatively dominant position, you start to see a bit of things that get less than ideal. In the 60s, 70s, the Congress did it. Now we have a different party doing it. But this is not the stage for politics.
Messaging is the same, the packaging is different. Dr. Thiagarajan, the messaging is the same, the packaging is different. Is that where we're at?
The consequences of concentration of power are the same. The hands may be different, that's all.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I mean, it's... do you think if the Green Revolution were deployed today, sir, you think it would have been as big as it was in the 1960s? Because I think what happened very crucially in the 1960s was Mrs. Gandhi allowed science to take credit for the entire, the onslaught in the fields and all that, which led to such bounty. You think such largesse would exist today or no?
Yeah, again, I don't want to be perceived as making political statement, but I'd say, listen, the Green Revolution, without it, we wouldn't exist. So that is not in discussion here. The question more is about, can we achieve the evergreen revolution, which he talked about, which is, both continuous improvement in agriculture as well as agricultural yields and crops and financial outcomes for farmers while being ecologically and biologically much more sustainable. I think that requires a faith in science and a kind of apolitical approach to implementation of the best ideas irrespective of where they come from. I'm not sure whether we are in the same kind of mindset now. I don't want to say more than that.
You said enough.
Yeah.
You said enough without saying more. But that's your art form. I mean, you're able to say so much without putting out so much over there. But shall we move the topic back to Chennai, which is exactly why we are here and why I wanted to bring the book home. I think Chennai was the setting for a lot of his triumphs, and I think a lot of satisfaction which research essentially gave him in the latter years of his life. And I think a lot of his, and I do believe very strongly that, the Green Revolution was what kind of christened him and what was his greatest claim to fame. But I do believe that he wore so many hats and with such rare aplomb that, his entire, I mean, as I said, when I was writing the book, I felt that, my life amounted to literally nothing. Because look at what one man achieved. Almost any country, 44 countries reached out to him. He was always there. Whether it was Vietnam, Cambodia, he was a, hunger warrior for the world. I don't know how he managed the time. I mean, I wish I'd asked him that. I think I did once. He just said, you have to enjoy what you do. Even if you enjoy what you do, how would you find, his days seemed like 24 hours, had 48 hours packed into it, the way he went on relentlessly.
Yeah, I think it's a rare gift that people have to have such an impact. And he was the right person with the right mindset, the right talent, the right work ethic, and at a time when a lot of people needed it. So I think once his credibility was built, doing what he did in India, it was only natural that when he went to the IRRI in the Philippines, that first Southeast Asia and then Africa and other countries started reaching out to him. And of course, you know, the benefit of experience, the benefit of having been there, done that, is twofold. One, it gets easier to do the next time. And two, people know who to call because you're credible. You've already done it once or twice or 5 times, so you get the call.
You have proven history behind you.
It's natural.
Proven history behind you. But I think Chennai was also, you know, he was offered, you know, land by Ramakrishna Hegde in Bangalore to actually start his foundation there. He turned it down because he wanted to, you know, concentrate on coastal systems research, CSR. And the Chennai shoreline is what makes Chennai Chennai. In fact, when I was flying in yesterday, and day before actually, I was completely, you know, taken aback and completely beholden by the sight which greeted me. I mean, this endless shoreline which you saw. I mean, I do believe that is your greatest strength and also beauty. I mean, it was stunning. And that was also one of the reasons why he chose Chennai, you know, to make it his base for the foundation, the M.S. Swaminathan Research Foundation.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to think it had something to do also with coming back home to his own state and his own people, but surely, yeah, his range of interests had expanded, and now in the foundation they do a lot of things with mangroves, with fishermen. You know, they've expanded all the way out into the whole kind of, you know, feedstock, fishing, all of agriculture. But I think also it had something to do with the value system, because it was our DMK government that was in power at the time when the grant was made. And I think this notion of liberating and empowering women, of getting equitable access, of making it inclusive and ensuring that the rural parts of the state also got the kind of uplift that the urban areas were getting. That's very close to the philosophy of the Dravidian movement. And so I think our former chief minister, as recounted partially in the book, was very, very keen and said, you should not be asking me, I should be asking you.
I should be asking you to do this.
So I think it was, hopefully that had something to do with it, but we are certainly very happy that he chose this. Of course, I know that the foundation works with many, many states. A year or two ago, I had the luxury of attending an event, and there was a minister from Karnataka, Mr. Bairegowda, who had long history. There was a minister from Odisha, the deputy chief minister. So the foundation, we are happy it's located here. They add value around the country in different ways, in different places. And I think it's fortuitous outcome in that sense.
No, I think Odisha actually served as his laboratory for a lot of work. In fact, Naveen Patnaik, who's done the introduction to the book, wrote very movingly about the fact that he turned Odisha into his laboratory. And he'd taken his work there, the corporate hills that they do, you know, the work they do there with the tribals, with ethnotechnology. I mean, this is a foundation which still does yeoman's work. And, you know, it is my request that, you know, when you buy the book, you also help support the foundation as well, and, you know, the kind of work that it does, which I think very few, you know, places and very few people do. And so I think Chennai was, I think it's been lucky. It was, and of course it was homecoming for him. He was, you know, it was also a place which I think where he took his last breath. So this is, you know, he's part of Chennai's psyche and Chennai's soul. So I'm quite grateful to bring the book, you know, home.
Yeah, we're very happy you're here after Delhi. I think it's the second event, no?
Yes,
after
this
Delhi.
is the second event. I don't think any other place, I don't think any other place would have had monumental importance for him other than Chennai.
We're glad you think so, and we're happy you're here. And, you know, I think we've had a lot of our friends turn out today, so it's a good evening.
It is a good evening. Do you think we should turn the mic over and see if there are questions that we have in the audience?
I'm not sure I'm qualified to answer, but...
Neither am I actually, neither am I. No, don't put me in the spot, neither am I. Can we have a mic going around if there are any questions? We need youngsters or the people behind the cameras over there. Okay, there are no questions, there is one hand going up. Good, I'm glad to see one hand going up.
Yeah. So I think one question that I had is that considering that, so you are in like a pretty influential position right now, I think the work that MS Swaminathan has done over over 40 to 50 years of his most sentimental period, do you think that we currently have the infrastructure and the platform for like talent right now to actually go about recreating something like this in the current scenario, in the state and in the nation?
I'm not sure, recreating what?
The impact, at least 90% of some influential or impactful work that, like in the field of agriculture, to be honest.
Yeah, listen, I think, I'm not the Minister of Agriculture and I'm not anywhere. I think I'm number 27 out of 34 ministers in the protocol, so I wouldn't consider myself a senior minister. But if you say, can we make great strides in agriculture? The answer is absolutely yes. I say that as a, 500 years farming in the same place, family, and still with extensive operations across many different types of farming. I think the whole agricultural sector can still be hugely improved. We try many different things, and particularly we spend a lot of money and we have a lot of programs. In my department, for example, we've been trying to tabulate how many subsidies and grants and how many government benefit programs we run, and they run into the hundreds. Every government comes and announces some more. Very rarely do you cut back the old programs. And particularly in agriculture, we have tens of programs. We have subsidies for fertilizers, for seeds, for particular irrigation support, for tools, for rentals, crop support, insurance. So we run many, many, many things. But one of the ways that at least I felt when I was in my old role that we could do a lot better, and some states are doing it, and we are doing it, maybe some better than some, maybe not as well as some, is to make all of these programs focus on the really important thing, which is the farmer, or in the case of this, or in case of other things, the child or the woman. Instead of having department-wise budgets and programs, to actually look at beneficiary-centric ecosystems that we would build, agnostic to which department administered it, and make sure we had continuity so that we were tracking that beneficiary's needs throughout the life cycle of a crop or a child growing to adulthood or whatever the particular programs were. And so we've started to do some of that. Now we have all the way from what we call the Adangal, which is the crop record, to the land record, to crop insurance, to seed subsidy, to fertilizer subsidy, to access to the e-market, the futures market for the product, all of it integrated into one platform. That's the beginning, and I think we can do a lot more of that. Actually, there are some startups in the agricultural space around the country that are doing really good work, because there's still so much that can be improved. And I think technology and dissemination of the right information, the right time, connectivity, these are all tools to much greater outcomes. If we compare either per person productivity or per hectare productivity around the world, we are not nearly in the right place. We have a lot of way to go. And from a political or a philosophical perspective, farmers need to have a much better income model. Many of them are still living hand to mouth despite all these subsidy programs. There's a lot of room to improve. There's, some enterprising people can make a big difference. The government can improve its performance quite a bit also.
There's another question. Yes, gentleman at the back.
Yeah. I thought the questions about the book for the author, not questions about policy.
No. This is a shared responsibility. Come on.
Priyambada Meenakshi.
Okay,
Your aunt
yes.
So I just wanted to say I'm so proud and happy that you brought the book to Chennai.
Thank you.
Where it all started. More than that, I just wanted to ask you, I think we're just concentrating on the book. I want to ask you what inspired you to write and what is it that sparked your interest?
Well, I think simply because, this is not the first book which has been written about Dr. Swaminathan, and certainly won't be the last. But I think what made me look at writing the book was the fact that I hadn't found one in the market which spoke about, the human stories which sparked all these revolutions, which, took him all over the world. Because at the end of the day, for any intervention to work, the bottom line is still the human being at the end who receives that intervention. And I thought he had a gamut of stories in his life, which I think very few, books had touched. So I basically wrote a book I hadn't read before, and, a collection of stories. And that's exactly why the book came to me at the time of the lockdown when we were in Singapore. And, the Singapore lockdown, of course, was a very, very, it was a frightening, scary, it was, lockdown where we had, we didn't have too much freedom to go to a lot of places, and of course it's a very small place to be. So one had to challenge oneself creatively, and I enjoyed writing. It was actually my husband's idea. He said, instead of bouncing off walls, why don't you write? And he was somebody I'd admired all my life, and I said that, there are many stories there which actually require a patient audience. So, it allowed me then to delve back into the history of India, and as a historian by training, that was almost, too good and too true to pass up. So I wrote a book which hopefully people will find enjoyable reading, and I certainly enjoyed writing it. Yes, that was your question. Sorry, we cut you out before, but you have the mic now, you can speak.
Thank you, Minister PTR. My question is about how we can, innovations that address to the collective action. In general, the majority of the innovations are around individual freedom, convenience, and other, how individuals can use the innovation. But the evergreen revolution which Professor Swaminathan foresees is how to bring collective action among farmers, especially implementing the good management practices around pest control or irrigation systems. All the individual use technologies are being rapidly taken up. That leads to a rebound effect. But collective action is missing. How economic system and your field, IT field, can contribute to this evergreen revolution with collective action?
Oh, listen, we are continuously trying to bring small farmers together to improve their market kind of power, to learn from each other best practices, to support each other if they go through difficult times. So I'm saying going back hundreds of years, like where my lands are, which I inherited, as I say, for hundreds of years, there's different associations, like the Ayakattu Urumai, the guys who have the right to the water at different times, they all come together and they figure out how to share the water in a way that is equitable and not kind of one versus the other. So this is a practice that has been in our culture for a long time. Most states are trying to bring together farmer collectives, or what they call FPOs, farmer producer organizations, and provide infrastructure support from the state level, like processing plants, like cooling facilities, like collective marketing. And I've seen that in the Nilgiris, I've seen it in other hill stations, I've seen that in Kadalur. When I was an opposition member, I was part of the Public Accounts Committee, so we used to go around, check wherever they put audit reports. So most governments are trying to provide support for collective action and use education of better practices and, less poisonous or less long-term impact pesticides or weedicides, things like that. So that effort is ongoing. Of course, it can be done a lot better and a lot more effectively with technology. And we are actually doing some with AI now, where we can, without having to have some government employee do assessments, whether we can do image processing and have the machine, based on a rich database, start giving advice. So I think the future is quite bright. But a lot of people, almost every state around the country, I can tell, brings together the smaller farmers in some collective, in a cooperative, in a FPO, in some way. And that's the basis for collective action in region by region or area by area, crop by crop usually.
Are there any other questions? Because then I shall just put one question to the audience. You know, Dr. Tyagarajan, we've had a lot of interest in turning this book, you know, into a film. Now, since we're in Chennai, which turns out probably one of the most, you know, has the most incredible film industry apart from Bollywood. Now, if I were to ask anybody in the audience, who should play Dr. Swaminathan, can we have some answers? I really need help because this is a question which I have banged my head into the wall. Producers have asked me and I have no idea. Now, come on, Chennai, give me some answers. Who? Surya. Okay. Okay, yes. Dr. Tyagarajan, shall I start with you? No, come on.
I have something very much in common as Dr. Samya was telling me with Dr. Swaminathan. I don't go to the movies, so I can't tell actors that far apart.
That's such an easy get out.
No, that's true. It's a truth.
Easy get out. That's an easy get out.
Mammootty or Arvind Swamy?
Arvind Swamy is interesting. Actually, it hadn't struck me. Anybody else? Come on. Madhavan. Yes, Madhavan has come up. Yes, has come up. Anybody else? Come on, Chennai. You know, wake up and give me some names.
Prakash Raj.
Yes, sir.
Prakash Raj.
Prakash Raj. Yes, potentially. If there are any, yes, potentially. Yes, sir.
I am Dr. Swaminathan's nephew.
Yes, sir. Please go on.
And number one, Dr. Swaminathan was an extremely fair person.
Yes.
Fair in every aspect. Complexion, attitude, passion, everything.
No, yes.
Arvind Swamy will be the right person for this.
Arvind Swamy. Does anybody, yes, we know people who know Arvind Swamy sitting in the audience. Yes, Atte? We do. Any other names? Look, I need a little Rolodex of names because he's now not going to give me any. You're going to give me
No. I just want to say two things. That about 10 days or 2 weeks ago, I met Arvind Swamy for the first time. And I didn't know he was Arvind Swamy. Somebody introduced me. I shook his hand, and then I realized that's Arvind Swamy. I said, "Oh, very nice to meet you, sir." And then I happened to have a friend of mine who is making a movie about his grandfather, G.D. Naidu of Coimbatore. And Madhavan is playing G.D. Naidu. So that movie is going to come out like sometime soon.
So he's the Tamil
I
Nadu
don't
should
know
all
him
turn to.
otherwise, but I know that because my friend told me when I was in Coimbatore last week. Madhavan is going to be G.D. Naidu. Yeah,
that's what he said. That's what he said. He said Madhavan is acting in Coimbatore, right? Any other names?
Ma'am.
Yes. Boman Irani. You know what? I'll tell you why Boman Irani has come up, and one producer did mention it, and I'll tell you why that is a little difficult because Boman Irani is a very tall person. He's over 6 feet, 2.5 inches. And Dr. Swaminathan was, yes, very fair. And as his nephew very rightly pointed out, fair in terms of complexion, fair in terms of, character. But Boman Irani is physically very imposing, and I've seen him. He's very, very tall. I think that might be a little hard to, unless of course, you have, AI or something which can make him look smaller. But Boman Irani as a name
much easier to make somebody look fairer.
Or make somebody, yes. I don't know, this is we are in a land where, anything can be done with SFX, and special effects.
Ma'am.
Yes.
Ma'am, why not Kamal Hassan, sir? Here.
Yes, good question, but much too late. Much too late. Hello. I know who I need to turn to, but I shan't put the spotlight on him. Any other names? Others we can go back to quick Q&As. But this has been fun. No? Anybody from the Malayalam film industry? Because I'm missing names. Yes, Prithviraj, yes. Yes, Prithviraj was a name which even Meera Nair told me that might actually be a useful thing. I have a director sitting in the audience. Hello. Any answers? No. You said Prithviraj. Well, good. So do we have any questions now about Dr. Swaminathan or any suggestions for the film? Are you really serious to come out with the film, madam? Sorry, please give him a mic, somebody, because I need to. Sorry, I need to hear you, sir. Yes, sir.
Are you really serious to come out with the film about this novel, on this novel?
Well, there have been interest, but anything which has to come out is, especially filmmaking, seriously takes a lot of time because you have to turn a book into a screenplay. That is in itself a time-consuming business, about a year, 2 years or something. So it's not It's not going to be immediate, but there is hope, because I do hope that the stories that are in the book are essentially the stories of it. You need to sit down, dear. The one with the mic. I can't see the gentleman behind you. I think it is true that filmmaking is a laborious process, but I do hope it gets made, because I think his is a story every Indian should know about. And today there are so many platforms of telling a story. You could take it to Netflix, you could do OTT, you can do films. But films, I think, there is an old-fashioned charm to it. Dr. Tyagarajan, are you a bigger fan of films or OTT?
I don't go to the theatre, so only OTT. I don't know any better. I only see what comes on my screen in my house.
So OTT. Well, there are many ways of, yes, there is a lot of serious interest, but I think casting has been something which we've struggled with. But I have today got a huge number of names which I think we can bounce off, producers who are keenly interested. And there have been some. If you know of Chennai producers, I can tap. I'm happy to look into that as well. Kamal Hassan sir as well, right? Right, I'm looking on the left, I shouldn't actually. Yes, so do we have any questions? So no questions. So Dr. Tyagarajan, all it leaves me to do is to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule, and you've been incredibly busy. You flew in from, ladies and gentlemen, he flew in from Madurai today for this event, and I'm incredibly honored, incredibly privileged that you were here, and that you're a hard one to pin down, but we were able to do it, and you brought your own magic to the show. So Chennai, please read. And everybody who's leaving, there are refreshments and beverages after, and I think I'm going to turn the floor over to my husband for the vote of thanks.
Good evening, everyone. On behalf of HarperCollins Publishers, the author Priyamvada Jayakumar, and Professor M.S. Swaminathan's family, I would like to thank national icon Dr. Kamal Hassan, the Honorable Minister for IT and Digital Assets for Tamil Nadu, Dr. P. Thiagarajan, members of the press, honorable invitees, and friends and family for gracing us with your presence this evening to celebrate the publication of Professor M.S. Swaminathan's biography, Innocent and Earlier. High tea is now being served outside, so please feel free to have a bite, have a drink, and most importantly, don't forget to buy a copy of the book. Yeah, the author will be signing copies outside, so please line up for that. Thank you so much.
Testing.